it's Lorna. I wanted to make a video following on from my last one on navigating the UK benefit system, and in this one focus on PIP, personal independence payment, which is the main type of benefit that's there to support people with either disability or long-term illness. It's like money that's given for a purpose, so it's not there to be spent on luxury. It's there to help with any of the additional costs that you might incur from having a disability or long-term illness. So it can go towards, I don't know, any equipment that you might need for the home, any additional treatment that might benefit you, also to be used to pay for the care that you need. I am going to do another video about my experience of trying to get support from the social services, but yeah, for now PIP can also fund like care packages or to help with some of the cost towards that. So yeah, it's money that's there like for a reason, basically to give people the support and the treatment that they need. I had actually already filmed this video last week and it took me forever. Yeah, it was a really long video, and then when it came to like editing it, I just didn't like it because I was having quite a bad PoTS day, in that I had really bad nausea, and I felt like it could really show on the video, and also like bad brain fog, and I just felt like, yeah, I was just slowly rambling on about things, and I just didn't like it despite editing the whole thing. So I thought I'm gonna start again and try and go for something a bit more concise. So yeah, in this video I'm going to be sharing what I've learned through applying for PIP in the hope that it may help others. In my case, it's I'm applying for PIP mainly for physical health reasons connected to my PoTS, but I also have mental health conditions, so it may be, the advice I share may be helpful for both, which is good. I should probably mention, because I know I said in my last video on like benefits that I hadn't applied for benefits before, but I think what I actually meant is that I hadn't applied for like income related benefits like universal credit and ESA. But I had actually applied for PIP in the past, about 3 or 4 years ago, and I was in a totally different situation. I applied more because of my mental health difficulties affecting like my daily life and my ability to function and manage. So yeah, and I was advised to do so by employment specialist at the community mental health team I was under at the time. And it actually turned out to be a really negative experience in that I didn't have it granted. It's quite a long story, but yeah, basically I filled in all the forms, I provided 90 pages of evidence, I had to go to an assessment alone. That would be kind of my first bit of advice, is that if you have to go to any form of assessment, like to do with benefits or anything really where you're being assessed, bring someone with you, because yeah, I didn't, and it honestly would have made such a difference. I'll come on to that a bit more later, but yeah, so I went to an assessment. Everybody the whole way along seemed to be saying that like I would have no trouble getting something, which was reassuring, and the assessor like said that she was going to recommend me to get something, but in the end like it went on for ages. That's the thing, it's such a long process, so if you get disappointed, it's a long time to wait to be disappointed. And yeah, I received a letter a few weeks later saying that I hadn't been awarded PIP, and it was a really difficult letter to receive, and they kind of went through all the different areas, because basically like PIP is assessed across like various areas to do with daily living or mobility. There's like 2 elements to PIP, and for every single like area they scored me 0, and they wrote for every single section, like the general gist of the whole letter was that they said, we accept that you do have a disability, that your mental health condition does class as a significant disability, and that it does affect your daily living and like your ability to function and get around. But they went through each section and they basically said, we agree that you have difficulties in this area, but we believe that you can actually do these tasks. And it was really, so basically they said that I was lying, and it took a lot of me to actually admit that I needed support in certain areas, and yeah, so to receive that response after having gone and been honest and like admitted that I needed help, it was really difficult. Yeah, because the message was like, you have a disability, it significantly impacts your life, but we're not going to help you. And that did really affect how I felt about having to apply for PIP again. But I guess what it comes down to is that you just don't have a choice, because I do have a need for like more care and support, which I'm not getting at the moment due to funds. So yeah, it did make me have like a few reservations about it. But anyway, yeah, this time was slightly different. I think what was different about it, as well as like it being a different situation, and I applied more due to concerns around my physical health, is that I had more support like with the process, and that really did make a difference. So yeah, what I'll do is like talk about how you go about applying for PIP, and particularly focus on like anything I've learnt from filling out the forms and the whole process. Yeah, so I hope it's helpful. Apply for PIP, your first port of call is that you have to phone up a number, and you find that on, I'll link this down below, on the .gov website. They have like a section on PIP, and yeah, so you basically ring up a number. It's a very brief conversation. They just want like your kind of basic details and details of your GP, and just a brief like your diagnoses, basically just a brief list of why you're applying for PIP. Yeah, so based on that, they then see like if you fit the criteria, and if you do, they send you out a form which is like the main part of the application process for PIP. They send it out in the post, and it's called the How Your Disability Affects You form. My main piece of advice with this, like when you receive the form, is that what I found in general, that it wasn't always clear completely what they meant in the questions. I would say in general that the forms are very much geared towards physical health, and so it's sometimes difficult to see where like mental health fits in, and it is important to say that yeah, which is probably obvious from my previous experience, is that it is perfectly reasonable to apply for PIP as a result of a mental health condition or mental illness. Like that's what it's there for. It is a disability. It is something where you need a lot of care and support. So yeah, it's perfectly legitimate to apply for PIP purely on the basis of a mental health condition. Yeah, so the questions are very like geared towards physical health, and sometimes it's hard to know what they mean. That will probably become clearer as I go through the actual questions. So yeah, my main bit of advice would be to consult the citizens advice like guidance on the forms, because on their website, which I'll also link below, they provide guides on all the different benefits forms, like explaining in more detail what they mean, what counts as an aid, what counts as support, and their one on this PIP form is really good. I found that really helpful. So yeah, definitely do that. So yeah, how your disability affects you form. The first part of the form, like section 1, is where you provide details of like the professionals in your care, so that they can provide further evidence if needs be to support your claim. 2 is just where you kind of briefly list like your diagnoses, but actually it says, and like their approximate start date, but it actually says like a list of health condition or disability rather than diagnoses, because the good thing about PIP is that you don't necessarily have to have a confirmed diagnosis. I didn't at the time that I applied, because it's purely based upon how your symptoms affect your daily life. So yeah, that doesn't like matter if you're not at the stage of a diagnosis, because often you will be suffering from a problem before someone has identified exactly what it is. The same question, you then list your medications, and it also says to list any side effects you get from those medications or treatments, and that's really important like to be taken into account, because certainly from my experience most medications do have quite significant side effects, and that can affect like your daily life, so it is really important to put it out there. You get into like the main part of the form from section 3 onwards, and they basically, it all follows like the same structure. The first part of, it's all around different elements of like daily living. So like the first one is on preparing food, and the first part of the question is usually about, do you need any aids to do this task? And then the second part of the question is more, do you need support to do this task or supervision? Are you not able to do the task yourself? The first question on preparing food, it basically says like, tell us about whether you can prepare a simple one-course meal for one from fresh ingredients. And yeah, so the questions are like, the first question is, do you need to use an aid or appliance to prepare or cook a simple meal? Again, it's important sometimes they do list like some aids for like each question, but sometimes it's hard to know whether something counts as an aid, and that's where the citizens advice guidance was really helpful, because for example I have to sit in order to cook or prepare food. Also with this, like, yeah, the second part of the question is, do you need help from another person to prepare or cook a simple meal? And yeah, something which I found the question didn't explain very well is, what do they count as a simple meal? Like, are they talking beans on toast? Not that I eat that. Or are they talking about the ability to heat up food, make a cold meal? So yeah, so I looked on like citizens advice guidance, and basically what the government counts as like a simple meal is a meal cooked from fresh ingredients, like a balanced meal. So like the equivalent to dinner really, like meat if you eat it, and like carbs and veg, like a balanced healthy meal, all the way, like cooking it all the way from scratch. And that was really helpful to know, because actually that isn't something that I would be able to do. Like, my ability to cook is really limited to just heating up food for various reasons linked to my physical health. For every question, which is also really important to keep in mind, it says like, this includes help that you have and help that you need that you don't get. And that was something that I really had to think about for each question, because the reality is that most people are applying for PIP because they need more support, so they probably haven't got the support that they need at the moment. They also provide like a box like at the end where you add extra information, And I would really say just provide as many details that you can, make full use of the amount of space they give you to write, because the more information that you provide, the more information that you provide, the more like they have to go on and assess, and then it prevents like them needing to come, like delaying the process from having to come back to you, ask for like further reports, for further information, for further assessment, all that kind of thing. So yeah, make best use of the space. Question 4 is on eating and drinking. And get like the first questions are like, do you need an aid or an appliance to eat and drink? And then the second part is, do you need help from another person to eat and drink? And this, again, the question was a little bit unclear, because the question very much focuses on like the physical act of eating, as in needing help to physically like put food and drink to your mouth. But upon like consulting the Citizens Advice guidance, they do say that prompting does count as support and help. So that can be quite relevant to like people with eating disorders, which is something that I have suffered from in the past, and still do to some extent, because and again, it includes help that you might need but don't get. And so if the only way that you would be guaranteed to eat at every meal time would be to be like prompted by another person, that does count as help, because it shows that there's a need there for help. And also, like, my mental health condition does have like memory difficulties associated with it, and lots of other conditions do. And if that's the case, if you need somebody to remind you to eat, again, that does count as help. The next section is on managing treatments. So yeah, the first part is, do you need an aid or appliance to monitor your health conditions, take medication or manage home treatments? And it does give an example, which is helpful. They said using a Dosset box does count as an aid. Also, from looking up further guidance, I found out that having to set an alarm on your phone to remind you to take your medication, which is something that I have to do, that does count as an aid. Then the second part of the question is again based on support. So, do you need help from another person to monitor health conditions, take medication, or manage home treatments? Something that I looked into around here, again, is not very clear how this this works, like how this applies to mental health. And from looking up further information, basically, if you need someone, whether it's just the care of friends or family, to help monitor your emotional well-being, because for me, for sure, like, it's not always immediately obvious to me when my mental health is deteriorating. So if you need that kind of support, basically just someone there who checks how you are, it can be as simple as that, then that does count as like needing support to monitor your health condition. Also, like, it does count if somebody else has to like store your medication for whatever reason, because at one point, unfortunately, I wasn't like safe to be with a large quantity of medication, so somebody else had to store some for me. Yeah, that does, if you need that kind of support, then that definitely does count as help. Next question is on washing and bathing. Again, first question, do you need an aid to bath and shower? This one is, I think, quite straightforward, because they said that aids like include a bath / shower seat, grab rails, both of which I need, so that was straightforward. Then the second part, do you need help from another person to wash and bathe? And that does include, like, like I said, do they watch over you to make sure you are safe? It does include safety, and again, it includes help that you may need but don't get. So this was important for me to like consider, because for me, due to PoTS, like having a bath or shower, as I've explained before, is like does flare up my symptoms, and so there is a level of risk. It increases my risk of fainting. Ideally, I've been told that I should be supervised when I bath or shower, and yeah, and by supervised it basically means that someone just had to be in the house just in case anything was to happen. So yeah, the word watch over you does sound a bit misleading in a sense. I wouldn't like that. So yeah, and I don't have that help at the moment because I live alone. I haven't got that support. That's why I'm applying for PIP. The next section, I don't really like this section very much. Managing toilet needs. So it says, do you need an aid or appliance to use the toilet or manage incontinence? And this question appeared quite straightforward in that they list all what counts as like aids, and it is important to note that incontinence pads do count as aids because obviously it is an additional cost that other people don't have to buy. Unfortunately, that is something that I need in order to manage my condition, because PoTS with it does cause bladder issues. And then the second part of the question is, do you need help from another person to use the toilet or manage incontinence? That wasn't the case for me, but it is important again to consider, like, it also includes being able to carry out the task safely. And for these questions there's like a yes/no box, and there is a sometimes, because like some physical health and mental health conditions can be very variable. So yeah, the questions seem quite straightforward, but actually I ended up not being scored for it, which yeah, I don't really agree with because I do need an aid. Yeah, dressing and undressing. So again, first bit, do you need an aid or an appliance to dress or undress? I found they give some examples, but yes, it wasn't necessarily clear whether some of the things I used would count as an aid. Turns out they were. For example, I have to get dressed and like put my shoes on from sitting, because yeah, I'm not able to stand and I'm not able to bend down like to put my shoes on like that. So yeah, and that does count as an aid. Also, like, I sometimes have to, because sometimes like because of my PoTS I can't like lift clothes over my head. Have been able to today. I'm not having such a bad day. And that does, yeah, so sometimes I will need front fastening clothes. That does count as an aid, and that's not listed there. It says, there's, yeah, the second part, do you need help from another person to dress or undress? Again, the questions seem to be very focused on the physical act of dressing, but it is important to remember that this doesn't, like, help does include like prompting.